Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the news behind the news right here on Mix 94.7 FM. You're listening to Ralph Kintav, and we're going to get into the news behind the Social Economic Council. We have here with us on the program two Mr. Richardsons, one of them being the chairman of the SER and the Secretary General. So good afternoon, gentlemen, and welcome to the program.
Good afternoon, Mr. Kantav. Thank you for having us.
Yes, and good afternoon as well. Thank you for having us.
And can you give us a little intro about yourselves and then we get into the program?
Sure. I would allow the SG to go ahead and give his intro initially, and then I'm going to go ahead and then let you know a little bit about myself.
Good afternoon, radio listeners. Thank you for having us, of course, Mr. Kantav. It's a pleasure to be here on your show today. My name is Gerard Richardson. I'm the Secretary General of the Social Economic Council. The Social Economic Council was established by law on the 10th of October 2010. The council started to function in May of 2011 when I was appointed as the Acting Secretary General of the SER. The board of the SER consists of 9 members, 3 employer representatives, 3 employee representatives, and 3 independent experts. The role of the SER is to provide government with solicited advice and unsolicited advice. We provide advice on a range of different topics, social economic topics. You can think on the economy, finances, healthcare, education, spatial planning, etc. That's more or less the role. I've been in this function now for the past 10 years. So it's going good so far. Thank you.
Great.
Yes.
Great.
Yes, and my name is Damian Richardson. I've been in the Social Economic Council appointed. Now, this is my 3rd time being appointed. The first time that I was appointed was as a substitute member, and that was really fruitful, exciting opportunity. And on the second time that I was appointed, I then proposed myself to be the chairman. And I was appointed at that time by vote of the members. And then this time, the 3rd time that I was appointed again as an independent member, I represented myself again to be the chairman, and I was again unanimously voted as the chairman. And I must say again that it's been a wonderful opportunity to serve the country. I've been involved in many different advices over the years with the SER, and some very interesting ones that have helped the country. One good example is one of them that we worked on together, the SG, myself, and the board. Was really took a while to get it finished. Was the Better Waste Management for St. Martin. That one can be found also on the website. And another very telling one is the data. I think it's called.
Better
data for St. Martin, because one of the key things we found after the hurricane Irma was that we waited a while before doing it, and one of the things about the SER is that as an organization, and based on what SG already explained concerning the different members, the SER is one of the biggest advisory bodies on the island that gives advice on a social economic matters to the country, most important to the government of St. Martin. We are now formulating documents and information to be able to do that for Parliament as well, but more importantly to the governing structure of St. Martin. So within that context, we were able to, as a board of 18 members with all the divergent thoughts and issues, come to a conclusion that data was one of the lacking issues, because St. Martin, for us to make quality decisions and as a country to be able to have a good foundation going forward, we worked on that advice, and I really believe that advice, as well as many of the others that we've done, is foundational not only in St. Martin, but the manner in which it was done reaches beyond St. Martin, and it can actually have a good strategy approach for many countries in the world. So I think that is one of the good things that is coming out of what's happening with the SARE, that it can have a good impact for St. Martin as well as for the rest of the world.
Okay, and for clarification's sake, the advice you provide is to government and parliament, not no other, let's say, NGO organization, strictly government.
Correct. Well, right now it's strictly to government, not to parliament. If we send an advice, it goes right back to government. But parliament can request
Gotcha.
through government, through COM, basically, and then we are able to answer any questions for that matter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. And one of the things I would like you to elaborate on a bit, although you did provide info on the role of the SARE, is how important it is to our society. And the reason I ask that is because often people feel like, well, we have our advisory councils. They give advice, but people feel like the advice are just stacked up somewhere and maybe not used. Can you elaborate on that a bit more?
That's an interesting question because one of the things that makes it important, because what you said is sometimes it's stacked up, but once the advice is put into the public realm, once completed after the 6 weeks, anyone, whether legal, lawyers, community representatives, anyone can appeal to the government on the basis of that advice to call them to order, to call the country to order, or to facilitate any kind of private venture, for that matter. If they see that the SARE has advised government and said, listen, these are some important areas that we need to focus on, it is also, remember, it is a social and economic advice. So it is not only a call for the government, but it's also a call for the country to say these are some important matters that we can use to help us as a people move forward. So in a sense, no advice actually is sitting. It's there as an opportunity. And I'll give you an example of how that was used. For example, we did an advice on the central, it was a bank. What was it again?
The dollarization one?
No, the development bank.
The development,
development bank for St. Martin.
That was for Parliament.
Right. And what happened was we gave an advice that said, based on the country's condition at the moment, it would not be wise to establish such an entity. The pension fund took that as a challenge, an opportunity, and begin to appeal to the SARE, to the government, to say, we have the capacity, the capital, to liquidity opportunity to establish such an entity. And to what extent it is complete, fully there, not whatever, but more about the idea of an advice being placed in a community and then an entity of sorts, not government, took it up and begin to establish a positive action on the basis of. So, and they communicated with us, and it was a fruitful discussions.
Yeah.
So things like that can happen. So it is not that the advices are just sitting there. They have options, and sometimes people don't pick them up right away. It takes a minute, and then they realize, oh, wait a minute. Because another example is when we had Parliament last year, and the President of Parliament now mentioned that for years the advices of the SARE were seen as maybe significant or insignificant, or should we take them serious or not? And he began to read through those advices and realize, whoa, they are very significant advices. It has nothing to do with no personal agenda or whatever. It has to do with people who have been tasked with an opportunity to serve the country and are doing it on the most professional, efficient way possible. And a lot of excellent work is being done, and we have some top advisors and also as top persons working within the SARE. Some young persons as well as those who are seasoned as the SG I can really give props to SG and the team because they're really doing a fantastic job. So in that sense, like I said, as a board and as a team, a lot of good work is coming out, and it is not that we're here. In other words, holding a space. We're here together as a country, trying to see what's the best way for us to move forward
and contribute. Okay, so you said several things, and I like that you particularly mentioned the manner in which the advice is given, a professional manner, because the SED is an independent body. On one note, I think what you first mentioned about the development bank, I believe it was enacted by the APS.
Mm-hmm.
That's if the St. Martin Investment Association, I think, maybe came out of that advice that you spoke of. But another interesting thing too is also, the fact that so the advices are not just a matter of being placed in the hands of government or being stored in a USB or just online, hosted on a website, but that regular St. Martiners, businesses, organizations can take up these advices and make use of it to further contribute and help build St. Martin.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, we saw that. That happened in, I believe, 2017, 2018, when we issued the Better Waste Management advice concerning the landfill.
Mm-hmm.
We saw that a group of citizens, they went to court.
Yes.
And they made use of the information that was in the said advice. So it's the advice is once it's submitted, it's for government. And after 6 weeks, it is made public through the Minister of General Affairs, the Prime Minister.
Mm-hmm.
Once that advice is then placed on the website of the SER, it's there for all St. Martiners to take a look at it, read it, critique it. That's, the role that we give back to society. The advices should be seen from the perspective that it's written on behalf of society. The stakeholders there, the various stakeholders in the SED, they represent the broad-based community, the employers, the employees, which are the unions, and the independent experts. So it's a joint effort from the staff and the board to produce the product as an advice.
Gotcha. And could you share a bit more information on how does the day-to-day function of the SED go? How does that work?
Yes. The staff consists of 6 persons in total. Myself, we also have a senior policy advisor, we have a legal advisor, and we also have a policy worker, and we have an office manager. So basically what happens is when government submits an advice to the SER, it is the board is notified, and we have a meeting in which the stakeholders get to share their views on the advice and also contribute points of interest which they would like to see established in the advice. The task of the Secretariat is then to take back those views of the board and to compile an advice which is in assignment and in the best interests of the community, which is represented by the stakeholders, of course. It goes back to the board where they can deliberate on the advice, and sometimes this can take from a week to a month to 2 months, depending on the subject matter. Once the board has given their views again, we might have to make some revisions. We go back, we meet on the subject, we have discussions, of course, within the staff, and then we go back to the board, we present it once more. Once the advice is approved, the board members have to vote on the advice, in which they either give their okay or their dissenting views. We strive to always have a majority, a unanimous advice, of course, which is also good in the best interest of the country. And once that advice is complete, it is submitted to government. Government has 6 weeks to give back response. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't for their own reasons. And once that is done, after the 6 weeks, we notify government from, we would like to make the advice public. What's your views on that? And then they give a okay or not. Sometimes, depending if we have a draft law that still has to go to Parliament, we can't make it public right away because it still needs to be debated in a central committee meeting or a public session afterwards. And then afterwards, we can publicize the advice.
Okay.
So that's a bit in a short version of
how things work.
within the set. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, to pick up on that, in terms of the board itself now, in terms of how we operate, in a sense. Internally, well, right now we are dealing with the COVID factor.
Yeah.
So just as Parliament, we have the online meetings, and with Teams we're using, and with that we're able to facilitate meetings with each other and get feedback and input from the board, different board members, the various board members. It's a bit challenging at this moment, but at the same time, we're still being able to do what we need to do in terms of everyone having the material, everyone being able to go through it, everyone being able to submit their questions, remarks, and everyone being able to also represent their position based on the different organizations, entities that are a part of the SER at this moment. And that also, again, in terms of debating an issue, most members come prepared so that they're able to represent their back end view, because everyone has a different part of society that they want to protect or represent, and to make sure that the advice incorporates that element or that aspect. And that is sometimes a heated debate or discussed because someone else also thinks that their view is important too. But at the end of the day, you have to also show justification, researched facts, and the staff also, if you're coming as a board member and you say something, it is also evaluated, checked to verify the facts. And if your facts or your thoughts are unfounded, then so be it. And then we confront that together as an organization and move forward.
Understood.
So I think that teamwork is there. And also, if there are things that we don't know, we've had an occasion where if we weren't clear about an issue, we have someone, whether it's the Minister of Finance or whoever it might be, especially, let's say, for better waste management advice, we had the minister come in at the time and explain. We had a bunch of questions, and we were able to get those questions answered so that we would be able to finalize the advice. And that advice took us almost 3 years to
Wow.
finish because of the nature of the information and questions. Because up to that point, there was no real clear factual data to justify some of the claims or remarks or issues around that particular advice. And that was an unsolicited advice from the SER. And that is also one of the things that is important to note, that we have solicited, but we also have the opportunity as an organization to submit unsolicited. So that if we see something as an organization, and while we're discussing issues, something might come up, and then as an organization we say, you know what, maybe this would be something important for us to focus on as an organization to make an advice on, like better data for St. Martin, and that is the kind of stuff that, or dynamic, in a sense, that happens within the board.
Okay. And would you say that 6 staff members is enough for the level and amount of work that you guys do?
Yes, it varies. At the moment, it is enough, but we were also, as you may know, inactive from April 2020 until August 2021. So we were inactive for 16 months. At that time, we worked on our unsolicited advices, and you can basically spread out the work. But then when we became active again, past August, we received some urgent advice requests.
Yeah.
And then it can become a bit, tense. It can become a bit stressful because you have to produce, at a higher rate. And it is expected that you give these advices sometime.
In a timely manner.
Yeah, in a timely manner, complicated advices, just to name a few. Right now, we're dealing with the draft legislation on the increase of the wage limits to establish the sickness ordinance and the accident insurance ordinance. That is an urgent advice request that has to go into effect before the 1st of January 2022. That was a request that came on behalf of the Kingdom Council of Ministers. This was one of the requirements that this law needs to be in order. So
sorry, so they can request make requests from the SEF?
No. They can't make requests
through
from the
through the
SEF.
government?
No. What happened was the Kingdom Council of Ministers decided, it is in connection also maybe with the country packages, etc., that this law should be in place before then. The request came from the Ministry of VSA.
Okay, gotcha.
So public health, social
Affairs and labor.
Social affairs and labor, pardon. Yes. And that's one of the advices we're dealing with. We also have another one on the one-time hourly increase on the minimum wage, also from the Ministry of VSA. And we also have another urgent advice request in which we are requested to do a study on the cost of living on St. Martin, mainly among civil servants, citizens. And all of these things, they take time. And how do you go about, deciding which one has priority? At the moment, we're dealing with the sickness insurance, of course, and the accident insurance, because that has priority before the 1st of January 2022.
Time bound, yeah.
Correct. And then we try to answer the call in a timely manner, but that's not always easy, because we have to see who is dealing with what advice. Some advisors are more experienced in a certain subject matter, so they can compile the advice maybe at a quicker rate. Others need more time to do more research. Others are more meticulous. They want to study some literature. They want to go through, interview different stakeholders as well. So it's a combination of different factors that come together to create an advice.
What could be mentioned is in a normal year to year. For active, once the SARE is fully active, you're looking at anywhere between 5 to 6 advices per year
Okay.
that is represented, and that sometimes can include unsolicited as well as solicited.
Okay.
So you're looking at about 2 unsolicited and about 4 solicited.
Yeah.
That could be managed, because and I mean, we have some advices that take a long time, like just mentioned, the better waste management, and that could be something that's also going on simultaneously while working on something else, because there's certain information, like SG mentioned, that is not available at the moment, that you would have to research and prepare and get everything together, and then we would then go back to it. Again, so now in terms of those are the active advices, and in terms of the unsolicited advices that would come on board once we are able to have done our due diligence with the ones that were submitted officially. We have, for example, the immigration advice that is an unsolicited advice that we're working on, as well as, and of course, saying this one now would perk a little bit, but we've been working on a tax reform advice, and that's been on the dockets for a while now for us to finalize that advice, because also it's not an easy advice, but also it incorporates quite a lot of other elements. So if we're going to do...
And very relevant.
Right. And the timing, the relevancy, the nature, and also the category and specific aspects of it that we would want to handle is, I think, important. And finally, you have the preventative health care advice. That is also something that is unsolicited advice that we're working on at this moment. Normally, to select the unsolicited advice requests, we, as a board, sometimes the board members, like I'm just mentioning how it happened the first time, when I was a part of it at the time, where the board members submit certain issues that they feel and sense and realize that is important for the country, and those ideas are then voted on to see if that would be a relevant issue to be researched, and as well as then the staff checks and balance to see, hey, is it going to have enough meat, to become a proper advice, and then as a board we vote on it, and then from that point there's a list made as to what would be the advices that we would work on. So that means whether this board is in session or another board comes, those advice points are already in place. So we just are consistent with what we do as an organization. So it doesn't matter which chairman is there now. We have work that is there for us as an organization to be continuous.
Okay.
You know.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that. And speaking of relevance, one of the, in addition, so I took note of the fact that you're working on advice on the cost of living. And that really came out as well earlier, in August, particularly with the Constitutional Court case, where, we are aware that the judges requested information from government. There was discussions of, for example, the poverty line. If I'm not mistaken, did the SED do a study on that?
Yes, back in 2015, a while back now, we submitted.
And would that have to be updated, sorry?
So yes, we're right now we're working on a new one, the cost of living advice. Okay. That's a more relevant one because the first one we did dates back now 6 years ago.
Yeah.
So right now we're working on the cost of living advice that was submitted by the Honorable Prime Minister, the Minister of General Affairs. Is basically to do a study to find out the potential impact of the quality of life on St. Martin. So are the salary scales basically still up to date? We know we are in a precarious situation right now in the country, but nevertheless, we have some persons within our community that can meet, their day-to-day costs that they may have. So we still need to have a look at, how are we going about this? Are the prices, the supermarket prices, in line with people's salary? Because we know that prices often rise, but the salaries do not.
Correct.
So, and there are various factors for that. I'm not an economist. I'm not trying to justify it. I'm just saying it from the perspective of the Social Economic Council and what we are tasked to look at.
Okay. And one question I have, because I know that you guys also have substitute members.
Yes.
But how does that work in terms of, do they fill in when a main member is not able to attend the meeting? So.
Well, I can say something because I was a substitute member.
Okay.
I started as a substitute member, and what I found really exciting is that as a substitute member, I stayed in tune with the member that I was substituting for.
Gotcha.
As a substitute member, you have access to you get all the information, just like the member. But if this member is not available at a time or can't be at a meeting, you then are taking their place.
Okay.
And then you would have the right to vote at that moment when they're not there.
Gotcha.
But in general, your voice is as equal as the member's voice when discussions are being had about any subject matter. So for that reason, all substitute members are just as prepared as the members.
I gotcha.
Because we're here to have a discussion to help St. Martin move forward. So that is what and how the substitutes function in the context of the members, in the context of the board.
And all members and substitute members receive a remuneration. The substitute members only receive a remuneration when they actually substitute for that member. And the members are required to be present every month, at least 2 meetings, for them to receive their remuneration. It can also be that a member is absent due to illness or other important matter, and then you will not receive a remuneration. It's only for when you're present in the meeting, you will be compensated for that reason. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Just as a quick note, as you mentioned something there, and I thought maybe I should expand a little bit on that. Normally it's 2 meetings per month. On occasion, there have been situations where we call extra meetings, depending on the nature of what we're working on. If we see that we need to put in an extra day or 2 to facilitate getting the advice finished or voted on or whatever it might be, we then ask for that extra day or 2. So I can tell you on some occasions the board is really at work, because you have to also realize that each of the board members are active in society in their jobs. They're not working, they're working. And the job, in a sense, just gave them 2 hours or 3 hours to do the meeting, to have the meetings.
Yeah.
But separate from that, there's research, reading, preparation work that has to be done in order to be a part of those meetings.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a very challenging task, but at the same time rewarding, because again, you're being given the opportunity to serve your country in a unique way, in order to help give advice on serious matters that affect us. Because for example, we talked about better waste management. We just talked about cost of living. And the advice was done in 2015, and the idea is about upgrading it now. And realizing that the data that is put there is going to go into the future for the future generations to be able to stand on. So we have to also work effectively in terms of whatever we do. So just a quick note in between.
So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. You're tuned in to the News Behind the News with Ralph Kantav here on Mix 94.7 FM. And I'm joined with the Secretary General of the Social Economic Council and the Chairman of the Board, Mr. Damian Richardson. So we last left off at basically the advices that SAID is working on and the process in which that is done. But to go back to the board, basically the SAID has not been functioning for basically over about a year or so. And that has, of course, I'm pretty sure have hampered your ability to really operate, and particularly because of the time that we're in, your advices on, for example, certain laws that, were proposed in Parliament and so forth would have been quite helpful, I would say. But can you elaborate a bit more on the conflict that led to, the board being inactive, and give us some background history on that?
Well, what I could do is I could begin to illustrate it a little bit, and then I would allow SG will then continue to explain more the technical side of what's been happening.
Gotcha.
Initially, from my understanding, of course, the board finished the end of April 2020, and from that moment, before that, the Prime Minister had asked for the Chamber of Commerce to begin the process of organizing the economic or the employers' organizations. Within that line, it would have probably taken a couple of months to make that transition happen. And that would have positioned the SAIR to be in a better standing internationally because of the international legal context that we many times are a part of. It is important that as a country, we also have a proper structure where we then have the proper representation, so that we are not looking in terms of a lack, that as an organization on an international platform that we are lacking in our structure. So the Prime Minister, just as what had been done in 2017 with the unions, was to structure that there would be an umbrella organization put in place, so that as well as what would then be done for the employers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So within that context is where we thought it's going to take a couple of months, but it then took a little bit longer. With that, SG?
Yes. In 2011 May, as I explained earlier, the SAIR was officially active. On the board, we have the 3 employee representatives, which is done by the unions, and we have the 3 employer representatives, which is done by 2 stakeholders on the island. And we have the 3 independent experts, which are persons from within the community that are appointed based on their expertise by government. In 2011, when the board was established, one stakeholder held 2 seats, and the other stakeholder held 1 seat. For various reasons, this was done. I am not aware because I came after. What I am aware of is that one stakeholder was not pleased with the fact that they had 1 seat and the other had 2 seats. In 2014, the board was reappointed. Some members on the board was reappointed, and the same seat distribution took place. And then in 2017, The board was reappointed. New persons came in. Some persons were reappointed. And the same seat distribution took place. One stakeholder, again, throughout the years has expressed their dissatisfaction with the fact that they are attributed one seat. I must say that the SER doesn't have a say over who is appointed. So I want to be clear in that. The Social Economic Council itself does not have a say and cannot dictate who is represented from which institution. Those persons are appointed by their various institutions, which is the employers, in this case, the two stakeholders on the island, and we have the employees, which are represented by the various unions. The point of contention from one stakeholder is for the fact that they are of the opinion that they are entitled to the most seats on the council. And they have taken government to court for that. There is a court case ongoing right now in which they express their dissatisfaction with the course of action that government took to organize these various employers. So as SG, I do my utmost to stay out of this matter because I don't have no say in this. All I can basically advise is that everything is done within the legal framework of the SER. That is my goal, to ensure that the integrity of the SER is upheld, to make sure that each board member has a voice, equal voice, and to ensure that the proper structure is followed. Now, as it pertains to the views of the stakeholders, that is their opinion, which we all have to respect, and government has to make its case with regards to the reason that the seat distribution is done in the way that they would like. One thing I can say, and this is within the kingdom, is that all of the employers and the employees are represented as equal as possible. There is no social economic council within the Dutch kingdom in which one employer or one employee organization has all the seats, because we have various voices in the community, and we can say that, I'll give an example. Liaison 101 is the largest radio station, but they do not represent all of the views of the opinions. We have a 96.3, we have a 94.7, we have a 93.9, we have 91.8, we have various radio stations, we have various views, various ideas. So I believe on a small island we have to try to work together, try to include everyone, and you, Mr. Kantav, might not agree with my views. Mr. Richardson might not agree with your views. So we have to try to work together. But that is my opinion, and I believe eventually we will get there. And it's just unfortunate that this is taking place. And to close off, I must say that all parties involved should show better constraint, and the SER should not suffer because of your dissatisfaction with the course of action of government. Because at the end of the day, the country requires the SER to give its advice, and by having the SER inactive because at the moment as a stakeholder you're not pleased, you're only doing the country a disservice. You're doing the people of St. Martin a disservice. So these are some of my personal views, and as I said already, this matter is now being handled by the court. So we will just wait to see what the outcome of that will be, and we move forward.
I mean, one of the key pieces of a message that SG mentioned just now has to do with the disruption of the democratic condition of the country, because the SER is fulfilling a high council role, just as all of the other high councils, to maintain that. You don't call it a watchdog, but it's more about...
It's more like a pillar.
Right. We are working as a collaborative with the other country, because you can say that the Prime Minister is leading the country, but at the end of the day, we all together are responsible. So every entity has its role to play. So if the SER is not fulfilling its role, that means the country as a whole is weak. And this is what we have to also focus on, the bigger picture. And that, I think, is what is missing at the moment, is understanding that we are part of a bigger picture, And there are bigger issues that are important for us to focus on. And if we're going to be a part of an international reality, the SER also needs to function in that way. And that is what we are busy trying to see. Okay, let us get to that place as an organization.
Okay, great. So you mentioned a High Council of State, and in your 2020 report, it basically stated that the SER, for some time hasn't really been regarded as one of the other councils of state. And can you basically give further details as to why you filed a complaint about that with the Ombudsman?
Well, I'm going to allow the SG to explain that, because that issue was handled in call it a technical way, because there are certain documents, research, evidence that had to be submitted to the Ombudsman at the time for her to do her deliberations, and then from there to render a verdict, a position. There were meetings held where the Prime Minister and others were present, and within that context, the result was then presented to St. Martin. So with that, I'll allow SG to go ahead and give some details on that process that took place.
Okay.
The matter of the SER filing a complaint with the Ombudsman started back in 2019. We submitted our draft national ordinance to be revised, and one of the main goals were to revise the law in order for us to be officially allowed to give advice to Parliament. Also, we had some provisions in there to streamline the seat distribution where it pertains to the employers. Also, we had some matters in there where it pertains to my role as the SG for calling a meeting in the event that there is no board. Also, we had a term placed in the law, because we are of the opinion that society changes. Right now, we have some members who are there for 10 plus years. There are other persons like yourself and others in the society at a given point that also should be given the opportunity to serve on the council. So that was one of the catalysts for us to propose this revision.
Gotcha.
For various reasons, which I will not get into, this was delayed. And we're 2 years further, and the Ombudsman ruled last year on the matter, in which the Ombudsman set some points of order. The Ombudsman explained that the SER was not treated fairly in the past. The Ombudsman also pointed out the fact of the delay with the appointment of the board. This is the second time. The first time it was 7 months.
From 2017, I believe.
Yeah, 2017, from April until October.
Yeah.
And then from last year, April to August, which is 16 months. And if you look at that, you take those 16 and those 7 months together, the SER has been inactive for almost 22, 23 months.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then, but not interestingly, maybe not the right word, but unfortunately, perhaps in years where you notice that is when St. Martin really needed the to render its advice. So
it's a pity, and these things happen. It's just unfortunate that it had to reach that far. I believe in this society, everyone deserves respect, from the cleaner to the Prime Minister. Regardless, we're all humans, and I believe that within government, certain persons in certain positions should lead by example. I myself, if I'm talking to a person, I have to remember that this person also deserves respect, and I have to speak to them in the right manner. And we might not always like each other, but we have to work with each other. And I think once we can act as professionals and get off the high horse that some of us are on, we will see that the country will move forward. In my opinion, St. Martin is its own enemy. It is not the Dutch. It is not Curacao or Aruba, any other country. We ourselves are constantly in the clinch with each other. Parliamentarians, ministers, high-ranking civil servants. So we need to take, and I'm saying this including myself, a closer look within and try to set the right example so society can regain confidence in our elected officials, confidence in institutions, as they said, more confidence in each other, and then we will see the country move forward. To round it off, the Ombudsman ruled that the notion that was out there for years that the Senate is not a high council, it's not based on literature, it's not based on any law. It was an opinion of individuals by saying, hey, the Senate is not a high council. So some of our politicians blindly ran with that. But we're happy now that the Ombudsman set the record straight. It's in the annual report, and we hope in the future that once we reach to the point that the Constitution can be revised, that the Senate is giving its rightful place in the Constitution mentioned as a high council of state.
So overall, you would also add that, as the report says, that the undermining of the SED and its independence would be something of the past.
Well, we hope so. Like I said, going forward, I will do my best. And of course, we make mistakes along the way. I have made mistakes. And for me, I can own up to my mistakes. I have no problem with that. If I make a mistake, honest and grown enough to say, hey, Mr. Kantav, this was my fault. But oftentimes we see that persons on the other end are too prideful to admit when they make mistakes. Or they feel, I don't have to tell that organization that I made a mistake, who they feel they are. And that breeds the contention and the dislike. The resentment. And then when people see these things in Parliament, why is this person behaving this way? Or why did this person act this way? But sometimes there's a build-up. And we have to try to avoid these things from reaching to the point that you have to go to the Ombudsman to file a complaint. We have to sit down with each other, talk to each other, listen to each other, and most importantly, respect each other. I keep bringing up that word because, in my opinion, there is a lack of it within our community, and especially amongst our elected officials. And that streams down the high-ranking civil servants. And we see it, I don't want to get into what happened with the Ombudsman, but we see it in our society.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to add, when you see the structure of the SER or the structure of most of the high councils, or even let's look at it in a broader sense, the structure of Parliament, the structure of the government leaders, as well as if you go into any private entity, there's always going to be, I don't want to call it a competitive dissension of whether that person's voice is more important than the other person's voice, or should they have the right to lead, or should I lead, or who should be the one calling the shots, At the end of the day, what you realize is the country going forward if everyone is shooting out the tires? Is the country going forward if everyone is pulling on the steering wheel? Is the country going forward if there's no windshield, if the car starts being pulled apart? Where's the country going? We clearly have a dump, and we have a lot of cars that are there that have been pulverized and crushed, and hopefully they can be recycled. But as a country, we have to start realizing that we are organizations that are put together to create an efficient vehicle that can take us into the future. One person said it once, they made the example of if you had a car, one car that you can choose for the rest of your life, what would that car be? Which car would you choose? Because you can't buy another car. That's the only car you have. And then he turned it around and said, you know what? That's like your life. You have to take care of yourself. You only have one body. You only have one life to live. As a country, we don't have another St. Martin.
Yeah.
We only have one St. Martin.
You're right about that one. Yeah.
And the reality is St. Martin has been through a lot over the years. From generation to now this generation. We have another generation that we're going to be dealing with. But we've been given an opportunity to establish what we call a nation. And we're getting a bit antsy with what part of that nation we want to be. hold on to, whether we want to be the tire, the windshield, or whatever. But everyone is a part of this future. And if we work together, we can create a better long-term future for our next generations. Because that's our focus at the end of the day. Because you're here today, but you're gone tomorrow. But what did you put in place? What brick did you put in place for us to be, for the country to be able to move forward for the future?
Yeah. So then finally, my final question is, I know that in the past, the SED used to, host different community discussions and stuff. And I understand, well, now, talking of getting together is a bit antsy, but what have the SED done in its, on your guys' side to further build that awareness of the organization and so forth?
What we have done, right now, I just want to use the SAR's year report to elucidate a little bit, because this is the year report that we have published for 2020. But what is interesting in here, it also mentions in Chapter 7, there's a couple of videos, really nice videos that explain the manner in which the SAR functions. So it is easy to have anyone in the community can go there and look at the video
on our Facebook
on
page.
the Facebook page, as well as on the website.
Yeah, on the website.
You can then go there and look at the clip, because a lot of people are video connected these days.
Yeah, correct.
And in that way, you get a quick breakdown of what are the things and issues that are important and how does the SAR actually function. And maybe one day, one of the young people in the community might say, hey, I want to be a part of that organization one day. And I think it is very interesting because I am my age today, and I never dreamed that I was going to be a part of the SAR. When I was young, I never even knew there was a SAR, but once I became aware of it, I think it's one of the most privileged positions that you can have to really give advice, that you can be honored with that role to give advice to your country, to help your country. I think SG, the staff, and the different members recognize that and operate in that way. And I really think continuing forward, we would encourage the community to see, hey, can I be a part of the organization one day? And I think that's a good thing to say.
Yeah. Just to add, our last activity in the community was in 2019, 2 years ago now already. 2019, we hosted a joint lecture with the University of St. Martin on immigration policy. Prior to that, in May, we had a symposium with the SARs of Curacao and Aruba. We did a joint symposium on labor migration. And in the future, we're planning on possibly collaborating together again. So in hopefully 2022, we will be able to roll out some new ideas, some new joint ventures with the SARs within the kingdom.
Nice.
And we definitely will be coming back to society, and hopefully we can have live events again where the public can be present. I don't want to elaborate too much on them because the board also has to give the approval, of course, but we're in the early planning stages on coming out with a possibly new symposia and possibly new lectures if the situation permits. We would prefer to do them, with the crowd where people can ask questions. If not, we will see how we would accommodate. What's the best way
hybrid
forward?
Or something. Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to thank you guys so much for coming on the program. Very insightful, and I do appreciate the information, and hope to have you again soon. And the platform is also available whenever you have information to share as well.
Thank you for having us, Mr. Kantav.
All right, great.
Thank you.
All right, listeners and our viewers as well. That was the news behind the news with the SAD. Thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in next time.